moment to breathe. Grab a beverage or two. We got professional guests with lots of stories for you. So take a seat right here and join us on Careers Over Beers.
Welcome to Careers Over Beers podcast. I'm the host, Jesse Krause, and today I have a real-life fairy on, I believe.
It is true. Yep, real-life fairy.
Real-life fairy. What's your name?
My name's Amanda Mayflower.
And you dress up as a fairy and other things for a living? Is that correct?
I do, yes. I started the Flint Hills Fairies right before the pandemic hit, and then I've spent the last several years just kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't work and clarifying my vision. I was a preschool teacher for about 12 years, working in early childhood and elementary. And when the pandemic hit, it seemed like a good time to pivot my career and take everything that I had learned working with kids and working with the imagination and take that as an opportunity to bring that into everyday life.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So you used the pandemic as an opportunity.
I did.
Was it rough starting that, though, at the beginning of the pandemic?
It was, because it's a creative endeavor, it was nice because it gave me plenty of time to learn to sew costumes. I got to watch a lot of YouTube videos about other people who do the type of work that I do. There's a fairly large cosplay community that do not just characters from TV and movies and stuff, but they also do fairies. So whether that's Ren Fair people who are into portraying fairies or just fairy people, we are out there. There's also a huge group of mermaids.
Is that right?
Yeah. So it's
not something you normally think about. Group of fairies and mermaids out there running around.
It's a subculture for sure.
Yeah.
So
hell yeah. So you like sour beers too?
I do, yeah.
I hope that I got the right one here. I just chose one that I like because I'm not a big sour guy myself.
Okay.
But I have had this one. The who makes this? Odell Brewing Company.
Yep, sipping pretty.
And this is one that I do actually enjoy, so I hope you enjoy it as well.
I do. The first time I bought it, it was just so pretty, and of course I'm a fairy lady, so I was like, look at all the flowers.
That's right. That is perfect for a fairy lady, isn't it?
Perfect. Yeah. Good job.
Well, let's have a drink of beer here. Cheers to you.
And cheers to you.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. It's rare for me to like a sour, so Odell really nailed it with that one.
It reminds me almost of a wheat beer. Like it's smooth like a good wheat beer, which sours aren't always.
It's not overly sour either, you know? I don't really want to feel like I'm eating a Sour Patch Kid when I'm drinking beer. Yeah,
I understand.
Okay, so tell me how you got started doing all this. Besides what you already told me, did you already have the idea a long time ago and then you just kind of used the opportunity when the pandemic hit to start it? Or was it something you just kind of, let's go try this?
Well, it actually didn't start with fairies. So back, I would guess it was around 2010, 2011, my friend and I wanted to pull a prank on a party that was happening on the Saturday night before Easter. And so we thought, let's rent an Easter Bunny costume and show up at the party after midnight, and then everybody can party with the Easter Bunny.
Oh, nice.
And it was really fun. And it turns out that drunk people actually really like the Easter Bunny.
Do they?
Yeah. They were like buying me drinks all night. And so it kind of turned into a tradition for my friend Whitney and I, where she would come to town, we'd rent an Easter Bunny costume, and then we'd either take it to a party or we'd go bar hopping.
Oh, that's awesome.
And, different people would wear the costume.
Because drunk people are a lot like kids, right?
They are.
Getting drunk, they're just kind of falling all over the place. Like, oh, look at that bunny.
They're like, wow, this is so cool. Your inhibitions are lower, so you would maybe do things that you wouldn't normally do.
Right.
Like give the Easter Bunny a hug or sit on their lap. You're a 35-year-old man, and you're like, I'm too tough for this during the working day.
Yeah.
But you get a couple of whiskeys in him, and he thinks it's pretty funny to have a conversation with the Easter Bunny.
For sure.
So I got started doing that, and must have been 2013 maybe, that both of the costume shops in Wichita went out of business. There had been 2 costume shops in Wichita, and they both went out of business in the same year. and stopped running costumes. And so I had to make a very tough decision. I was like, oh God, what do we do?
Yeah.
You know, because we love this tradition and we love the Easter bunny. You know, we'd have Easter egg hunts for adults.
Really?
You know, we'd have those parties every year. Yeah. One year we had a giant piñata full of all kinds of interesting trinkets and toys.
That could be fun.
It was fun, right?
I like that stuff, kind of reviving your childhood playfulness inside of you, you know?
Right, while still getting to be an adult.
Exactly.
So both these costume shops went out of town in Wichita, and I was like calling a couple of my friends. I'm like, what do I do? You know, like, do I just let this go, or do I buy a costume? And at the time, you know, $250 is a lot of money. You know, if you wanted a nice costume, like one of the mascot costumes, I mean, those can be $500 up to $1,000, you know, just depending on the maker and if it's new or if it's used. And so I decided that I would go ahead and invest in the Easter Bunny and got a costume and continued to party with the Easter Bunny for many years. I would take it to festivals, sometimes not even on Easter. And, you know, it's one of the warmest things, you know, if you're camping and it's cold and you're up late, you know, you are warm when you are in that Easter Bunny costume. So that's what got me started. And then it must have been 2014. I was living in Newton, Kansas, and I got the idea to take it out into the community on actual Easter Sunday. And so I just took it down to Main Street. Newton's a very active community. I felt very comfortable just going out in the costume and meeting people. And so, you know, there's a train that goes across Main Street in Newton, and it was great because the train was going by, and so no one was driving up and down the street. But as soon as the train was gone, all these cars flooded by, and I could see people's faces. And it's not just the kids, right?
Yeah.
Adults were like, "Wow, the Easter Bunny," and I don't have to pay a bunch of money to see him, right? Because that's the other thing. The Easter Bunny, when you see him in the mall, costs a lot of money. It's like $25 for your kids to sit on its lap.
Yep.
So, you know, people would circle the block, kind of a couple churches on Main Street, and they got out, and the kids were just flooding me. And
were you just walking around?
Yeah, just walking up and down Main Street. It's a bustling town. So that's kind of what gave me the idea to continue doing it, and not just late at night, you know, but to start being the Easter Bunny also during the day, which is kind of a different endeavor.
Not just the partying Easter Bunny, right?
Yeah, right.
Although I do want to party with that Easter Bunny.
Okay, we can make it happen. Yeah. But it is interesting, you know, being in this line of business, being a fairy, being the Easter Bunny, being a cowboy or cowgirl, being Santa and an elf. People immediately peg me as a children's entertainer. Mm-hmm. And that's true. But for me, the real important thing is to reawaken the child within all of us.
I love it. Yeah.
So while I play with the kids, I also play with the adults and try to tease them a little bit and get them to pretend.
Yeah.
So I think it's been really nice to blend both of those things in my work.
That's super cool, honestly.
Yeah.
You kind of found something there that wasn't really an official job, right?
Yes.
You kind of just made it one.
Yeah, I made it one. Yeah, I knew a friend, and she was the Easter Bunny one year at Town West. And she said it was the worst job ever. She was so hot, you know. I mean, it is a hot costume. You're in it, you know, when you're doing a mall gig, you're sitting there for $8 an hour with all these kids coming up on your lap.
Right.
It's hot and sweaty, and you can't go to the restroom, and you're thirsty. There's no beer.
Well, the people that do mall gigs are probably a different type of person than somebody like you, right? You're there to kind of see their face lighten up, revive that spirit, show up at places where they wouldn't expect it to be. Sometimes you think of somebody at a mall and they're just kind of making in some money and just,
right,
you know, get them in and out, in and out, in and out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there is a difference in my company because of that. You know, some places that I talk to, they've purchased their own Easter Bunny costume and they do all of that celebration in-house. And, you know, if somebody's not real interested in wearing it and then they get forced to wear it, then it's just different.
Yeah. Then it's a scary bunny, right?
Yeah, then it's kind of a scary, grumpy bunny. Like sometimes my boyfriend has to wear the bunny costume for me.
Does
and he's
he?
just like, oh gosh. But he does it. I'm thankful for that.
Have you ever had an encounter with a kid where they're scared of you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Last year we went to a house and the child was like 2.5. So they'd never really seen anything like that. I mean, and they had really grown up during COVID, so they hadn't had the daycare experience. They hadn't been around a lot of people in general. And so it's kind of fun because if the kid gets shy, then you get shy. You know, you turn around and pretend like you're not there, and then you play peekaboo with them. And And, you know, by the end of the visit, if you're real lucky, they'll high five you. You know, you're like, here's your gifts I brought you. And they're like, okay, I like candy.
So you're talking like a full costume, right? Or is it the bunny costume one where you have like rabbit ears on or something?
It's a full costume.
Full facial covered and everything?
Yeah, I have 2 of them actually. They're different models of Easter Bunny, I guess you would say. And one has a head, you know, they both have the kind of white onesie that you wear. And then one has a head that's more like a stuffed animal. And so you see through the eyes. The eyes are always mesh in the costumes. And some of them, the mouth is open, some of them it's not. And so you can kind of see through the eyes or see through one eye. You know, there's no peripheral vision. Sometimes it's only vision to the left side. So there's a lot of looking back and forth.
So if the kids wanted to topple you over from behind, you would have no idea.
I would have no idea.
All you can see is straight ahead.
Yeah. I've actually been attacked in the Easter Bunny
have
costume.
You?
Yeah.
By adults or kids?
By adults. Yeah, it was, you know, it was a festival and it was after dark, and I'm thankful that I had a few friends behind me. You know, anyone who's a professional mascot or has done much like that will tell you should always have a handler, because you aren't aware. You have no idea if the kid's about to pull your tail, you know, or grab your leg. I mean, you don't want to trip on them. And so in that case, there was an adult that was really unhappy with the Easter Bunny and
what for?
Was punching me in the face.
What?
Yeah.
So he was legitimately mad?
He was legitimately upset. He felt threatened or whatever. I don't know. I mean, he was not in his right state of mind. And so my friends got him away from me.
What a douchebag.
Yeah, it was so
Who the hell wants
strange.
to beat up the Easter Bunny?
I don't know. I'm sure he didn't get any golden eggs that year.
He must have never got money for losing a tooth when he was a kid.
Yeah, right? No kidding.
Or I guess that's the fairy part.
That's the tooth fairy thing, yeah, but no money in the Easter eggs.
He must have opened empty Easter eggs when he was a kid.
I mean, that's always the exciting one, right? You pick it up and it jingles and you're like, yay, yes. Pennies, nickels, quarter, yeah.
It'd be fun if you did it with adults. You've probably done this where you put little shooters of alcohol in there.
Yeah.
You know?
It is very fun. We haven't started offering that through my business yet. This is really going to be our first full year with the ICT Easter Bunny because of COVID. So last year we did a lot of porch visits. We found that worked well. People would hire us, we'd sign them up, and it was just all day for the weekend of Easter. And so that worked really well. But there is a strange stigma about mixing children and adult stuff.
Yeah.
You know, even though parents like to drink beers, even though parents go out sometimes and enjoy themselves, I find a stigma about being a children's entertainer who also entertains adult, because as soon as I say adult entertainment,
bing.
Yeah, something
what
completely different comes into your head. So I have talked to a few bars in town, but I don't have anything set in stone yet in terms of what might be possible.
So you're just kind of in that phase of trying to figure it out right now with the adult portion of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if anybody came up to me and was like, hey, I need you to throw me an adult Easter egg party, I'd be like, okay, that sounds great, you know, but it wouldn't be there wouldn't be any strippers there, right? Like, it's not that type of an adult party.
Unless we invited strippers and you to the same party.
Yeah, I guess you could do that. Right? And then we'd have to sign some contract about how you can't post pictures of the Easter Bunny with the strippers unless you buy me a whole new mascot. I don't want to taint the image, you know.
Yeah, your adult entertainment is putting more clothes on, more costumes on.
It is,
it's not stripping them off.
Yeah, it's the opposite. Yeah.
So that had to have been weird starting a business like right at the beginning of COVID, because it was already a weird time for businesses that have been around for a long time. I can't imagine what that was like trying to attend parties or events when there really was none of that going on.
Right. Yeah, we had just we had just done our media stuff. I had gotten my logos made. I had gotten my website built. And, I always try to be about a quarter ahead. Like right now I am booking visits for the ICT Easter Bunny with businesses and churches and preschools. And so that usually doesn't happen until a couple months beforehand. But in terms of marketing and media and hiring entertainers, like all that tends to happen a good 3 months, 4 months in advance. So 2019, we were ready for it. And then we kept watching. We're like, whoa, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And it just kept getting closer. Easter was closer and closer, and the pandemic was ramping up. And it's continued to stay ramped up.
Yeah, it has.
So
that had to have been kind of a bummer then, right? Even though it gave you more time, like you said earlier, to do things, you were all excited and everything, and then it was just kind of like, well,
never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. But I will say that the time gave me a lot of time to reflect on where I want my career to go, who I want to work with, and just kind of what the values and ethics are for running a business like this.
Yeah. So what were some of the struggles for when you started the business, like going through the process of making it a real business?
Well, one of the biggest struggles was investing my money in the right people and the right places. When, at least for me, I had enough money to get things going, to get my website going, to get my logo going. But when you're poor, $200 has to go really far. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have a job that you make a lot more money at, you can throw $1,000 at something and it'll be fine.
Right.
And so what I found, and maybe it's the most valuable lesson I've learned, is that if there are signs that the person that you're working with might not understand your vision, might not be responding to your feedback in a way that you feel like adds value to the project, then it's better to cut those people and continue the search for the right folks to work with. Mm-hmm. I know the first person I had build my website, I took a gamble. They were a great graphic designer, but building websites I found out was not actually in their wheelhouse. So I spent about $3,500 on something really lame.
Ooh.
And that was tough. I did still have a job at that point, working professionally. And so I became more choosy about who I invested in, making sure that I looked at their work and felt like it was fair in relationship to their prices. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot more reconnaissance now.
and that's also hard too for somebody that's starting a business, because when you're getting into it and you're really seeing your idea turn into something, you're so excited. You're like, just give me anybody, I'll pay anything. Let's just get it done, right? But that is an important lesson. Sometimes you got to step back, and if they don't have the same, because you have an idea, obviously, of what you want your business to be. And if you're working with somebody that's like, I don't know if I feel the same way about that.
Yeah.
That's never going to turn out good.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So that was the biggest lesson I've learned as a startup.
Yeah. Just being picky and choosy and making sure the right people are working with you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that goes with the entertainers that I work with as well. That was a learning curve for me. I come from a teacher background. And I'm collaborative by nature. I mean, as a teacher, you're constantly collaborating with all the children in your classroom to make something happen, whether it's a block tower or an art piece or whatever.
Yep.
And so I'm collaborative by nature. And what I learned last year was that it was very important for me to bring people into the fold with the Flint Hills Fairies, with the Easter Bunny, who were entertainers, who already had some theater background or some public speaking background or some teaching background, because, excuse me, the beer's getting to me.
No, you're good.
But I found that I also was spending a lot of time training people, and so that was a big lesson too.
Training them on how to do the stuff that you do in your costume?
Right, okay. Yeah. I mean, the Easter Bunny is pretty straightforward, but when I want to have characters who are fairies who need to be able to provide an immersive theatrical experience, that's a gift. People who can improv in the moment to say, hey, you're a water fairy, go. And they're like, what?
What is that?
Yeah. So,
But did you have any training in any of this before you did this? Or is it all just kind of self-taught? You kind of just developed your vision and then you just taught your vision to other people?
right. Yeah, I'm pretty self-taught. I did work with a woman, Silly Sally, and I did bubble shows for her. Was the first experience I had doing children's shows for birthday parties. And so but I was already a teacher, so I already understood how to talk to kids. I understood how to keep their attention, how to get that engagement. So I think so much of what I do is honestly different than theater as well because it's engaging the people.
Right.
So it's a little bit of theater and a little bit of education. And so I am very self-taught. I've seen a lot of burlesque shows. That's probably my favorite type of entertainment. And I'm always most interested, I love the burlesque acts, but I'm always most interested in the MC because the MC is the one that holds the entire experience together. And when I go to a party, that's what I feel like. I might be Aurora Dawn, the dewdrop fairy, but I'm there to help curate the entire experience. To say, all right, who wants to learn how to make wishes with pixie dust? There's something that nobody tells you.
Oh, so you're doing stuff like that as well then. You're teaching them things and
Yeah.
basically immersing them in that world.
Right. So the Easter thing is its own deal, and it's a lot of fun, and I'm very focused on it because it's coming up. But with the fairies, yeah, it is all about creating a new narrative, creating a world so that when we get hired for a party and our fairies show up, they're learning stuff. They're learning how to talk to trees. They're learning how to make wishes. I have some puppets that I play with.
How did you get in? How did that start? You told me about the Easter Bunny and costumes. How did the fairy thing start?
The fairy thing actually started, Botanica used to have an event called Tulips, Fairies, and Forts. And I knew someone who worked there, and they were familiar with my work as the Easter Bunny. And she asked if I would want to come be a fairy at Botanica. So I started doing all this research. Everybody knows what a fairy is,
Yes.
everybody knows Tinkerbell. But I really wasn't familiar, and there's a lot of different perspectives on fairies and mythical creatures.
I wanted to get into that. Do you believe in real fairies? Because that is a term, fairy is a term that people, like you said, think of Tinkerbell, but I know about some other folklore and stuff in Ireland and places like that, where the fairies are actually not fairies like that with wings, pixie dust and everything, but they're actual like real supernatural creatures.
Sure.
Fairy rings,
Oh yeah. Careful, don't step into one.
Are you in? So you know all about that stuff and you're into that world as well?
I am into that world. Folklore is how I like to approach all of these things. Even the Easter Bunny wasn't the Easter Bunny, it's the Astara Bunny,
Astara. How did the Easter Bunny start? I don't even know if I'm familiar with that.
The Easter Bunny was a representation. The bunny and the eggs were a representation of the birth of spring.
Okay.
And the potential that was there. And so it was traditionally something that would have been celebrated during Beltane. Wait, not Beltane. During Ostara, which is the spring equinox.
Okay.
So traditionally, it's when spring arrives, and that's when I don't know if I could say indigenous European cultures would have recognized that iconography, because a lot of that has been kind of mixed in with paganism and neo-paganism and different spiritual traditions.
Right.
And so I'm not sure exactly where that relationship started.
Because paganism was really like the start of the Christmas tree and stuff like that, right? Where you would cut a tree down and bring it inside.
Yeah, that comes from a Germanic tradition.
Does it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Christmas tree was all about keeping hope during the last of the cold winter months, right? Because January, February is really bleak and really depressing.
We know that right now, don't
Right
we?
now, it was snowing today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of traditions that come from Europe that would have been practiced by indigenous Europeans before Christianity came, before Rome came. And a lot of those traditions, like before the Christmas tree was the Christmas tree, it was a Saturnalia tree. And that was done by the Romans. And so before it was a Saturnalia tree, it was something else, right? That was part of an indigenous cultural practice in Europe.
Wow, that's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
You're all spun up on your history, aren't you?
I love it.
Do you?
Yeah, I think it's important. You know, I always just got one narrative about things.
Yeah.
You know, American culture has its way of viewing Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and fairies. But to me, fairies are just so deep and so interesting. And so that's when I started digging deeper. And I mean, there's a lot going on right now in terms of, you know, not appropriating other cultures. And so I've had to look back in my own personal history and say, where did my ancestors come from? And how would they have treated these things?
Mm-hmm.
And so what would my Scottish ancestors have thought of fairies and little people? And the way they thought about them is that colored by Christianity or the Catholic Church coming in and telling them how they should color it.
Yep.
Fairies, the way we approach it with the Flint Hills Fairies is we tend to be very animist, which means we believe that there are human people, but there are also tree people, cloud people, sky people, roly-poly people, and they can all teach us things and are valuable relationships to nurture. And so with animism, it takes that religious aspect, that spiritual aspect out of it a bit, and just we try to focus on the relationship to the earth. And when you look at indigenous cultures, whether in North America, whether in Europe, I mean, all over the world, they have practices of relating to the earth and having relationships. So what's kind of coming out now is that North American indigenous peoples had relationships to little people. You know, the Choctaw had stories about what we would call fairies.
Yes.
And that's everywhere.
It's everywhere. And it's super interesting because I went to Ireland and learned about this too from like a storyteller that was over there. And it's crazy when they show you, just like you were saying, all over the world, they have similar stories of these little people, these little creatures, whatever they are, you know. They form these rings, which you can find anywhere in the world, these little fairy rings.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. It's weird stuff. So I'm glad that I brought that up because I kind of wanted to see, and I'm glad to hear that you are all caught up on that world and you're pretty deep into it, it sounds like.
Yeah, I am pretty deep into it. I think for me, this authenticity is important. And as I've kind of struggled through finding my vision for this group, you know, for a while we were all just pagans. And so with the fairies, there was a lot of kind of ritual stuff we were trying to figure out. And then we were like, are we a religious, ritualistic group? Or are we a performative group? Or what does it mean to have performative ritual? How can we do that? And so then it really brought me to how can we do that in a way that is non-denominational?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, for the winter solstice, we gathered at Riverside Park in Wichita at their solar calendar. And we brought our gnomes, right? We had gnome characters with little pointy hats. I learned to starch fabric and make pointy hats. It was really fun. And we asked, as part of our community ritual, for people to bring an evergreen bough. And just a small evergreen bough that they could add to the decorations around the stone as a symbol of that hope that winter will end, that we will make it through as a community. It was simple but really touching.
Right.
We brought extra boughs, but we didn't even need them. Like everybody, there had to be 60 people there.
Oh, wow.
And everyone chose to participate. So I'm really curious to see what happens with the spring equinox, because we'll be doing another event at the Standing Stones in Riverside Park.
Will you? And it's more important now than ever, I think, that we kind of go back to these old traditions that we had to connect to the earth more in a world where we're covered, you know, the ground we walk on is concrete all the time. We're usually inside all the time. We're looking at screens most of the time. Having that connection with earth and kind of getting back to the roots of what humanity is, I mean, it's super cool stuff. So
yeah.
And I love that you're doing that because I love hearing this story and I'm glad that you guys are like that because I didn't know what to expect at all, and a lot of people don't.
From the crazy fairy lady?
Yeah, because you don't know if you're just dressing up for fun, if you just like dressing up all the time, and to hear that you have a deeper connection like that, I love it. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you like dressing up too, which is a cool part of it.
I do, yeah. When I was getting ready today, I was like, okay, how far do I take this? Do I wear the wings? Do I not wear the wings? Do I do the crazy face paint? Do I not do the crazy face paint? So I've got my floral shirt on, I felt like that was nice enough.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We're just sitting in a bar kind of, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I've taken the fairies to the bar. Maybe the leprechauns would enjoy a good pint.
You have some leprechauns?
Yeah, my partner, actually, when I met him, he was already a leprechaun. He had the green pants and the funny little hat, and he plays the bagpipes and the accordion. So I was like, wow, I love you. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So with the fairies, what do you actually believe they are?
What do I actually believe they are? I think I believe that fairies are a voice for the earth. I believe that they're an energy, and whether they're the energy of the tree in human form so that we can speak to the tree, or whether it's something unto itself, I'm not really sure. But I've had plenty of interesting experiences and sightings.
Are you willing to share any of those, even if it's just one?
Yeah, sure. So I think in Western culture, we get really caught up in whether or not it's scientifically true. And we forget to take a look at the mythic part of our imagination. Right? And the stories that we tell ourselves, while not scientifically provable, are also very true.
Yeah.
We all have our delusions of grandeur, and we all have the things that we love and tell narratives about. And so when I talk about my relationship to fairies, it exists in that realm. You can't scientifically prove it, although there are people who take pictures of fairies, which I always think is fascinating.
Yeah.
But I guess one of the experience that came to mind, which was just kind of random and funny, is I live on 2 acres of forested property right next to the Little Arkansas River.
Uh-huh.
And so our property, as much of it is woodland. And I was out there one day just, breathing and walking and playing with the dog and doing my thing. And it was very interesting. I looked down and I saw this bone. And it must have been a fish bone, right? The raccoons dragged it out of the river at some point and ate it.
Uh-huh.
And it just struck me in a different way. It wasn't like, oh, look, there's a bone. It was like, oh, it's a bone. And I was like, okay, wow, it's a bone. What's this about? And so I guess what we're talking about also kind of goes into that psychic territory of being able to see things that are bigger than ourselves.
More than it appears. Or
more than it appears.
Objects too. I've heard of people that have sort of that sixth sense or whatever you want to call it. And if an object has been through something or has a crazy story, there's something more like, oh, this is a beer, but oh, this beer here,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
Okay. So, so I saw it, and then from the corner of my eye, I just kind of caught this little guy, that was like kind of in the tree, but not really in the tree. And I don't think I could draw a picture of it. But I said, okay, what's going on here? And just kind of queried the situation. And it was funny because the little being wanted me to put the bone on my head and make it into a hat and be a warrior. And I was like, you're ridiculous.
Is that right?
Yeah. I was like, okay, I guess I'll put this bone on my head. Do you feel better now? So
is this stuff that you're feeling, or are you hearing a voice? Is it just kind of like an intuition inside of you, like, this is what, okay.
Yeah,
I do.
I would say it's more an intuition. I see things occasionally, but it's always in my mind's eye. I don't actually see a fairy standing on the table, although that would be amazing.
That would be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so oftentimes that's what guides me is my intuition. So I'll kind of, anything that I plan for the fairies, I'm just like, okay, well, is this in alignment for me? Is this in alignment for the earth?
Before you do a show or something you're talking about?
Yeah, we've been asked to do like full moon events. And so feeling into that, does that seem aligned with what we're doing? And then as I'm preparing for the event, I might say, okay, like moon's in Aquarius, what's the message here?
Yeah.
And just spend some time with it and be a little imaginative and bring in some play and sometimes it's like a fairy comes or a spirit comes and is like, do this thing. And sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't.
I'm sure it's got to feel magical sometimes, right?
Oh.
Where everything just clicks and it's perfect.
Yeah, it's inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I try to, keep my eye on that if I really have to work too hard, that maybe it's not the way to go. There are doors that are not open to us as fairies. And while I find that frustrating, there's no reason to keep knocking on it.
Yeah.
I say, oh, all right, well, we won't do an event at this place. I guess we'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so, you were mentioning fairy rings, and I don't know if you've ever participated in circle dance, but that's a really powerful movement of people together. And we've all been locked away by ourselves for the last 2 or 3 years. And so we forget how powerful it is to be together in a space dancing or moving in unison. And, while what I've talked about is kind of mystical, there are also groups of people that understand this that don't have that mystical bent. Anybody who loves to line dance, anyone who loves to square dance or salsa dance, they know that power of dance, and they know that something bigger is created when we move in unison with others.
Mm-hmm.
Even watching cheerleaders, that's obvious.
There's something there. You can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can't really explain it, but you can feel it. Mm-hmm. And it's done everywhere in the world in every culture, right?
Yeah, it sure is.
And circle dancing especially, that's very tribal, goes way, way back, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does. And the idea that we're out there dancing for a purpose, whether it's dancing in honor of the fire or dancing in honor of each other or dancing in honor of Beltane,
Mm-hmm.
The 1st of May. And so, oftentimes I've always loved to dance, and I'd go to the club and I'd be dancing, but I didn't have a purpose to it. I went to have fun.
Sure.
But to be able to engage in a group activity and be like, I'm going to go dance to do this line dance to totally nail all the moves with all these other people.
Uh-huh.
That feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, what do they call it? Co-regulating is what scientific term, one of the scientific terms that would apply to that. Emotionally, we co-regulate. If I start getting excited, you're going to start getting excited, and then we'll build that energy.
Yeah. Comedians do this all the time with comedy shows,
Okay.
where they are into it so much, and when the audience is clicking and it's all just working out perfectly, their jokes are landing right, they feed off of each other's energy, and it's better for both of them,
Yeah. They've created an entire thing.
Yes.
It's bigger than any one person.
Yes.
Yeah. I like that analogy.
So and with seeing the fairies and stuff like that, I wanted to touch on that again because I think that our human scope is so limited just with our visual range and hearing. There's more things out there that we just don't have sensors on our body for to detect, right?
Definitely.
It's very possible.
It is very possible. Have you ever seen those images that show us how butterflies and bees see?
Yes. And it looks crazy.
I'm like, wow, psychedelic flowers.
Yeah, they're experiencing the world totally differently than me and you are.
Yeah.
And so it just makes you wonder, what really is out there that we can't see, or maybe you can feel it. Maybe there's something to it,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't physically see it.
Right.
And it's cool stuff. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, thanks for affirming that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like the crazy fairy lady.
There's nothing wrong with being a crazy fairy lady.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I think people that don't have that, they don't have the capacity to think that way. I think that they're the crazy people. The ones that just are like, oh, this is work, this is my life, get home, watch TV, that's it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. That's just, there's nothing more to it. There's no connection there.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But you're trying to bring that to people, right? With your business.
Right. Yes, exactly. I am very passionate about bringing connection to people. So this year with the Flint Hills Fairies, we decided to kind of have a theme and run with it. And so we chose the theme of native flower fairies. So we chose 8 different native flowers, and each of my performers is representing a flower. And one of the reasons that we chose that is because we knew it would connect with an audience. We knew that there's already people out there rooting for the prairie, rooting for the bees, rooting for the butterflies, and who love native flowers. And that was an access point for us that I'm really excited to explore this year. Oftentimes, it seems like the only access point for fairies is either through like psychic fairs and mystical, spiritual ways, or through Disney. And those are 2 great communities to, explore the fairies through. But they have already ideas about what a fairy should be, They all have their own experience of it. And so I'm really excited to bring the Flint Hills Fairies to people who are conservationists, who are naturalists.
That's awesome.
They already kind of have a sense of wonder about the earth, or they wouldn't, spend so many hours.
The wanderlust people, they're already out there. They just don't really know it.
Yeah.
A lot of them have no clue that they are, but they are.
Yeah. I think curiosity.
Yes.
Right? I'm definitely looking for those people who are curious.
Yeah. That's perfect then, honestly. Bringing your world to them, that's perfect.
I'm excited.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So what are your goals overall with this business that you've started? Is it more for entertainment, or is it more for something bigger?
I think that anything I do will always be bigger because I do have my values that I operate from. Mm-hmm. So it's more than just entertainment, I think my goal for the business in terms of a social or cultural thing would be to just be able to open the hearts and the minds of people in my community so that they have a reason to get together to celebrate the earth, and whether that's at the solstice and the equinox in the park, whether that's a midsummer night tea party, or whether it's something else that they're just doing with their friends.
Right.
I mean, really the best thing that I could ask for is that someone meets us, has a great time, opens up their world a little bit, and then the next time they go to a barbecue with their friends, they bring a bubble wand. That's what I want. I'm like, take your bubble wand with you. You'd be surprised. I mean, adults also love bubbles. They're pretty.
Bubbles are cool. They're fun. Yeah, they are fun.
Yeah, so I think that socially, that's kind of my goal. I would love to build a community, kind of around that animist ethic and perspective. There are people doing that work, but oftentimes I've found they are in the university setting, right? I've been really keyed in on the work of Dartington College, which is in Devon, England. And I've been keyed in on the work of people from the Great Mother and Great Father Conference and the Minnesota Men's Conference. And some of the things that they were saying, even back in the 90s, are still very progressive today, And so I've found some of these thoughts about how we can relate to each other in a more authentic way, how we can honor the earth and our place in it, and how that can help us function as humans, right? There's a lot of sickness, not just in our bodies, but emotionally. Many of us are not well. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen all this work that they've done. I've listened to 1 million hours of podcasts and YouTube videos. And what I realized is that really great work's happening, but it's kind of happening in a vacuum. The poets are talking to the poets. The philosophers are talking to the philosophers.
Right.
So this gives me a chance to kind of take this message that I've gleaned about different ways that we can relate and bring it to the public.
Yeah. Find different ways to connect, but then open their eyes once they are connected.
Yeah. And just provide a model of other ways.
Sure. Because if you're writing a blog about, just connecting to the earth or attending a winter solstice event, you're really only going to connect to the people that would do that anyways, right?
Right.
So you're just trying to build a bigger audience and get people more involved and open their eyes.
Yeah.
That's kind of the gist I'm getting off what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
So that being said, I know you want to play a big part in making the world like that, have a better connection to one another and everything. What do you think the current trajectory of the world is right now? Is it getting worse or is it getting better as far as human connection and earthly connection?
You know,
Or do you not even know at all?
there's so many different streams of people. There's so many cultures. There's so many silos. Like even within a town, like we're in Colwich right now, right? And Colwich is going to have its own culture. And Wichita has so many subcultures, right? I was a bluegrass girl for 10 years, and I would go to Kirby's for the bluegrass shows, and I felt like I owned Kirby's, and it was my bar.
Yeah.
But you know what? I went there on a night that was a rock and roll night, and I didn't know anybody, and I was like, weird. What's happening?
Yeah.
Wichita's way bigger than I even realized. So I think, you know, it goes back to that adage of like you get more of what you put your attention on. And so I've tried to take inspiration from the people who are doing the good work, who are doing the work for connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that right now, especially with what is happening in Ukraine with Russia, you know, that's going to be a very fearful situation. It's a very tragic situation. People are couching it in terms of economic value. And I've been really choosing to listen and promote the voices of people who can talk about the human impact.
Mm-hmm.
So our world, I believe, is colored, you know, of course, by the media that we consume and the stories that we consume. And when our culture is more interested in the bottom line, the dollar, the product, the image, than they are in the human experience, then I worry.
Yeah.
you
For
know?
sure. For sure.
So,
I get that. And also just losing touch with their core of being a human, you know. That's
Yeah.
another thing that I see just from the outside is, like I said earlier, with social media and all the forms of media that we have, the attention spans that you've probably witnessed the kids are losing more and more.
yeah.
Life isn't as fun when it's not as like magical and mystical like you guys are doing, right? It's not
Right.
as fun when you're just watching a movie or you're fact checking everything on Google immediately. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
you don't get that childhood feeling
right.
that we used to have.
Inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, you know, I'm really interested in myth because it's a way of telling stories that we're not used to anymore. You know, you might watch a movie 20 times, right? Maybe you love Maleficent and you watched it like 20 times and it's the best movie ever.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll guarantee you, every time you put that movie on, it's told in the exact same way because it's the exact same movie.
Same thing.
Whereas it used to be, you know, the bards and storytellers, I'm going to tell you Maleficent, but it's going to come out 20 different ways.
Right.
And we used to understand that there was a lesson. It wasn't just entertainment. There were lessons. There was something to be gleaned.
Yeah.
From
You
a
gain
story.
something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a movie, you're really, I mean, you might get a little bit inspired if it's like like a Rocky type movie or whatever, but
Right.
At the end of the day, it's really just 3 hours of mindless nothing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mentioned earlier we went to Ireland and I had this storyteller tell me all these crazy stories. He's an older guy. This is what he does for a living.
Wonderful.
And told me all these mythical stories, these fairy stories, stories of people that were local to his area growing up there. And when I left that, I was like, this is a dying art. Storytelling like that is not something that people do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's all pull out your phone or Snapchat somebody or check out this picture I took. None of it's like, and you can tell with older people that they know how to tell a story. Younger people don't know how to say anything.
Yeah.
Just like, look at this, you know, look at my phone.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, I think even now after coming out of the pandemic when we haven't even had people to talk to,
Mm-hmm.
that we'll see a lot more of that. So I guess, you know, when I consider what I'm doing, I'm very aware that I want to be a storyteller. And it's been a big jump to get from books into the idea that it's okay for me to just drum and tell a story. Like,
Yeah.
I'm terrified. Next, not this weekend, but March 5th and 6th, the Flint Hills Fairies will be at the ICT Comic-Con. And then I have to, prove the pudding, and I have to tell the story.
Hell yeah.
And it's terrifying because I'm used to being like, here's the book, look at the pictures, turn the page, ask the question that I ask every single year at the same time.
I'm excited for you. You're super articulate. You'll do great.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you can talk just fine. Trust me.
Cool. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. But, also going back to bottom dollar and stuff like that, running a business now, that's an aspect that you still have to focus on, right?
It is, yeah.
Are you doing a lot of the booking and the scheduling and stuff like that yourself, or do you have a team that helps you?
Right now, I do most of those things myself. I bet I made 20 phone calls today for the Easter Bunny. I have not met my financial goals for funding the Flower Fairy project, and part of that is because there's only so many hours in a day. I do have an assistant director, and he has really been a game changer for me because I can have an idea and then I can bounce it off of him. And so that's helped me hone the vision a little bit more, and he's been a huge influence on me for that. He designed all the costumes for our Flower Fairies, and he's building part of the costumes, and I'm building part of the costumes. But really what's happening right now wouldn't be possible without the support of our community. And I'm very lucky to have met Beth at the Sewing Center. She, when I started telling her about the Flower Fairies project, she was like, "Oh my God, that sounds amazing. Will you come here and use my embroidery machine and embroider flowers on everything?" And I was like, "Sure." And so through working with her, I've learned so much about how to actually make my dreams a reality. And, the financial part is the most difficult part for me. Anybody in the children's entertainment business will tell you that kids' birthday parties are your moneymaker. Mm-hmm. And so I have financial goals for that. I'd like to be able to do 5 of those a month, then I could eat and pay my bills. So this will be my first year to really see how that turns out, because with the pandemic during all of this, while it's not a hobby, it was like a hobby. I also worked a construction job doing painting and tiling and concrete work so that I could pay my bills. Mm-hmm. And so right now is kind of a transitional time. I will be doing different Renaissance festivals. And I did the Kansas City Renaissance Festival last year, as well as a Texas Renaissance Festival. And I learned a lot. I learned that if you are an entertainer, you can be really feeling good if you make $250 a day, and you'll be so lucky. But if you own a booth, you make $2,000 in a day.
Really?
Really.
Huh.
And of course there are travel expenses, of course there are taxes, but it's caused me to feel like I'm on the right path and that I'm diversifying, because we also make jewelry. We have little fairy houses that one of our girls makes, and so we have things that we can sell. And what I learned last year was that that's going to have to be an important part of my business, because I do need to make ends meet, even though I have a pretty low overhead in my life, Yeah. I don't even have a TV, right?
Really?
Yeah. So the only streaming service we have is Amazon Prime. So that's not, that's a huge expense for a lot of people. I think my dad pays like $200 some odd a month for his television programming. And I'm just like, I can't do it. Yep. I don't need to do it. I got enough books to read. So
yeah, I understand. I mean, people in your position and in your field of work, it can be hard sometimes and a struggle to get through that. I had a magician and a burlesque dancer on here actually a while back. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know Rainbow Star.
I've met them. Yeah.
Have you? Yeah. And they told me. I think he told me one time he stood outside in the 100-degree heat for like 9 or 10 hours doing magic the entire time, and he's like, I came home with $5.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that's not something that most people experience that don't really chase their dreams and just kind of settle for an office job or something. Not to knock any of that either. Right. But to really chase your dream and create something new like you, especially, because you're doing something like doesn't really exist.
No, not here anyways.
And until it does catch on and everything, it can be a struggle. I understand that. But it's also awesome. We need people like you.
Thank you.
100%.
Yeah. You asked me, what one of my goals for a business would be. And maybe part of it is that the Midwest begins to value entertainment and value experience and place their money in those places, because the tips that we got in Kansas City were abysmal compared to the tips we got in Texas. And it's because in Texas, they have a culture of tipping. And if they like a show, they'll give you $20. They'll give you $50. And, so if anybody's listening to this and goes to the Wichita Renaissance Festival, the Great Plains Renaissance Festival, please think about that. The people who are performing for you have spent tens of hours, hundreds of hours perfecting their dance, perfecting their craft. And they may not be paid all the time by the festival organizers the full amount that they would need to really make the day worth it. And so, your applause is wonderful. We're not trying to extort you when we ask for tips. I hate that line because I'm like, all right, now if you like, if you like what you saw a little bit, give me $1. If you liked it, if you come again, give me $5. If you want some pixie dust, I got $20.
It's never fun to have to ask those questions or say that to people, but you're also not in a regular conventional type setting. You're out there at a Renaissance festival, so you have to.
You have to. Yeah, but that's always when people get up and leave. And I'm like, no, I haven't said the best line yet. Don't leave yet.
You got to say it at the beginning.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, I got to say it at the beginning. I try to pepper it in. Try to figure out where their magic's hiding.
Well, do you have any last advice or anything for people that would want to get into your type of work or want to work for you or with you?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, if you're starting a business, I would just really clarify your goals and do take the time to make a business plan. It is worth it because, like it or not, we've got to get our finances in a row and our ducks in a row. And so having that financial understanding as you go into it will help you make better decisions for your business. And I think that if you're interested in getting into entertainment, think about your why. And if you know your why, then that's going to carry you pretty far. If you're doing it just because you want to be famous, that's fine, but that's going to guide what it is you're doing. And you may have to go that road alone, if you're doing it, what's your purpose? What's your why? And I think that's been important for me with all the entertainers I've worked with. There have been some really great entertainers, and they just weren't a good fit for the culture of my organization. And that was sad. I'm like, well, I really want to work with you, but man, I can't have you exploiting me.
Yeah. You have a different idea of what you want.
Yeah.
Than I do.
Yeah. So God bless. Good luck. I want to see what you do. Show me next year. So, yeah, I guess those are my parting words. And don't forget to find the magic in the mundane.
Love it.
Yeah. Even if you can't prove it, it might be real.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I love what you guys are doing. I love your insight on everything and just the way you view the world. It's a wonderful way to view the world. A lot of people don't have that. Yeah. And that's unfortunate because if you can't see the magic and the beauty in everyday life, then it's got to be pretty bleak, depressing. Yeah. You just work, make cash, buy food, and die.
Yeah.
I mean, sprinkle some magic in there,
Yeah, get the pizza with the extra toppings sometimes.
Yeah.
No shame, no guilt.
Oh, I never have shame or guilt about extra toppings.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Get that pineapple sometimes.
Well, that's controversial.
Yes,
we can't talk about that.
Okay, sorry.
So social medias, do you want to shout all that stuff out? Tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. If you would be interested in booking an Easter Bunny visit, then you can look up ICT Easter Bunny. You can also go to our website, FlintHillsFairies.com. If you Google it, we better come up. And if we don't, I need to know about it. We do have a Facebook for the Easter Bunny and a Facebook for the fairies. So we hope that we'll have an opportunity to see some of you out there this spring.
Do you have Instagram or anything like that?
We have a Flint Hills Fairies Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for everybody listening or watching, this will all be in my description. Please hit up Flint Hills Fairies and book them and give them some business.
Yeah, let's have some fun.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much for coming on. Cheers to you.
Thanks for having me out. Getting some delicious beer.
Mm-hmm.